In light of the budgetary shortfalls caused by COVID-19, what are the most effective legislative approaches to expediting economic recovery in the district that you're hoping to represent?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. We, here in this district, we have a lot of families struggling. Households before COVID, 45% of our households could not afford their routine monthly bills. And of course, COVID exacerbated that. This legislature, an extreme GOP legislature, has sat on a windfall, a rainy day fund of $1 billion that we could put immediately to use in helping small businesses, workers who've lost wages and who are unemployed. Also, I think funding efficiencies in the unemployment system, which frankly, for a lot of people who need help, who are desperate, have found that it's very difficult to navigate this whole system while they're just trying to survive and take care of their kids and deal with a economic crisis.
If you were to be elected, what would you pursue as a key piece of legislation that you'd like to get passed and that would help constituents in your district?
Well, I think the biggest thing is that workers need relief right now. And we watched in this last legislative session where over and over bills were voted down that would have helped workers, such as a $20 million bill that would have helped workers who lost wages. Maybe they weren't unemployed, but like your restaurant workers, bartenders, things like that. And we voted it down. And $20 million in the scheme of a state budget is not very much. So the first thing we have to do is make a commitment that we're going to actually help the hardworking taxpayers of Tennessee and give them the help they need through this crisis. So we've got to help workers, we've got to help small businesses. That's the first job. And then beyond that, I think we can talk about economic development in this area and how we can spur some of that and not just attract companies into this area, but help the small businesses that build this area and businesses we've seen shut down, like the Willow Tree, Skillville, these cool businesses that we have that not only provide jobs, but a sense of community. I don't think we're well served when businesses like that disappear.
What's the most important legislative agenda you can pursue to guarantee all children in your district full access to the best possible education?
Well, I think we need to fully fund public education. The voucher bill that was passed 2 sessions ago is disastrous. It was passed in an extremely corrupt manner and pushed on communities in Nashville and Memphis that didn't want it. It's already wound up in the courts. It's been overturned. We're wasting tons of money trying to divert public money to private pockets. And so we've got to stop that. Secondly, we've got to give teachers the raise that they were promised and that they deserve. I went to ETSU and I watched Bill Lee in person get accolades for this 4% raise that was supposed to be going to teachers. And they took it away and they didn't do it. We have the money to do it, even with the COVID shortfalls. We had the money to do it. We've got to fully fund education and make sure that our kids have a public school where they can get educated, that every family has access to that.
I'm wearing a mask. We're still a good 6 feet apart. You're doing an interview, so it's better that you are not wearing one. But should people wear masks in public places?
Absolutely, absolutely. And the divisiveness on this is so absurd. From the very beginning, I don't understand how Republican legislators, in fact, the current legislator, Micah Van Huss, only wore a mask to mock. He called it leftist propaganda. This should have been a coming together moment for all Tennesseans. It is just common manners and common courtesy, and I think Southern values to respect your neighbor. And I think it's just a manner of respecting each other and saying, hey, I'm going to look out for you, you look out for me. This is not a big inconvenience. No one likes it. But if we had tackled this 6-7 months ago, we could have been out of the woods on this. So we definitely should, and I have been, and I appreciate the socially distanced interview.
Do you support any extensions of unemployment benefits and or increases in Tennessee's weekly unemployment benefit, I guess it would more be that at this point, during the economic crisis associated with the pandemic?
Yeah, I think we need to put some of that rainy day fund to work, and we need to help families and small businesses through this. Like it or not, we cannot pretend and wish this problem away. The pandemic is here. It is not associated with a political party. We have to deal with it. And regardless of what we're going to shut down or what measures are going to be in place, there is an economic impact. People aren't going out to restaurants as much. They're not gathering. We've watched as festivals have been canceled, and Blue Plum and different events that we're used to going to in the Appalachian Fair. Those things are canceled whether or not the legislature says we need to cancel them, because they're not safe. And these organizations are doing the diligent work to look at it, and they realize it's not safe. So we have that economic impact whether we like it or not. So we've got to help families and workers and small businesses through it.
Governor Lee, I guess probably now a couple months ago, announced that he was supporting a law enforcement reform partnership and task force. Do you believe that a closer look at Tennessee's law enforcement agencies is warranted?
I think it's very warranted. Obviously, there's been a big conversation about policing in this country, and I think we have to recognize that for every time when someone in Tennessee needs help, it's not necessarily a police call. We've got to look at ways where we can support social services, whether that is addressing addiction and helping an addict in need, or a domestic dispute. It might not always require a police presence. It might require a social worker or someone who is there more to help than to necessarily just arrest someone and jail them. I think we've got to look for solutions that aren't always as punitive.
Do you believe systemic racism exists in America? What is your opinion about the protests and counter-protests that have occurred around this area? And is there anything a state legislator can do as a leader to improve these situations?
Of course, systemic racism exists. We can't deny our history. I think the first step is acknowledging it. And I think the second step is listening. I think it's listening to the voices. It's listening to minorities. It's saying, yes, Black Lives Matter, and we're going to make sure that every Tennessean, everyone that lives here, has a chance to live their life freely and equitably and be a part of society. I think protests are a result of voices not being heard. So I think the first thing legislators can do, and certainly what I will do and have been doing, is listening to those voices and trying to understand their point of view. I'm not a minority, I'm a white man, I'm straight, so I don't understand the obstacles that minorities and other groups have gone through. I haven't experienced that discrimination. So I think it's incumbent on me to listen to those stories and to try to understand as best I can, and then where it's appropriate, offer legislation that helps those groups and make sure that everyone's treated equally.
Do you support a regional economic development effort that could involve merging economic development organizations and chambers of commerce in the Tri-Cities? And if so, what role should a legislator take in that, a state legislator?
There's a lot of talk about that, and I think as long as it benefits everyone, including workers, that's great. I think we've got to make sure that families here are making a living wage. When people can't afford their bills, they can't afford their rent, when they're working 2 jobs, maybe driving Uber also, that's not sustainable long term. So I'm fine with regionalism efforts, and I think that's great. I think we also want to spur small business and help those in the community here who we already know are committed not just to making a profit out of their business, but to this community and making it a better place.
There was a resolution passed in the last session that criticized the news media and dismissed its coverage of the pandemic. Was that a constructive use of time during the special session on the budget?
No, of course not. And, Micah Van Huss headed that up, just like he headed up tons of ridiculous bills in his tenure. And, it was a time where we had a problem facing us, and those many voices, including mine, were paying attention to this and saying, this is an issue we need to get ahead out of. And instead of taking it seriously, they mocked masks. They passed this resolution saying the media is sensationalizing COVID. Well, how's that worked out for us? I don't think the media sensationalized it. They tried to bring attention to it, and we had some very partisan voices that didn't want attention brought to it. And I think a better use of our time would have been listening to the experts, listening to doctors, epidemiologists, and scientists, and saying what's the best path forward for everyone so we don't have this long economic experience in kids in virtual schooling and all these hardships that we've kind of brought upon us because we did waste time in those sessions.
All right, we're to the last question. This is the moment for you to speak to voters. What makes you the best person to represent them?
Well, I'm a father. I have a daughter in third grade here. I'm a pro-business Democrat. I've run a small business. I've hired employees. I've hired contractors and other businesses locally. And I listen to people of a wide variety of different political parties and different ideas. I'm someone that I think can bring those ideas to fruition for this area. And I really care deeply about this area. This is home. I've moved here 10 years ago, but it is definitely home. And I think we're finding in this campaign a lot of commonality across parties and political divides. I, for one, am tired of the division, and I hope that we can kind of realize that, you know, there's no Republican or Democrat healthcare, there's no Republican or Democrat unemployment. These issues that we face are common to all of us as we drive through our neighborhoods and see various political signs. We know we all live here, we all want our kids to have a good education, we all want some community, and that's what I want to bring for this area as well.
Brad Batt, thank you for talking to us today, and good luck in the election.
Thanks so much.